ListenLayer simplifies some of the more difficult aspects of website tracking, such as tracking conversions based on chat activity. But once you have these basics down, you can start to explore some of the more advanced things that ListenLayer allows you to do. So today we're going to be focused on segmenting out our chat activity between sales and support requests. And to do that, we're going to be using the live chat tool. So I've just enabled the live chat listener in my account. And before I go any further, it's important to note you got to have your domain name in here correctly and saved. And you also need to make sure that your tracking script from ListenLayer is published on your website. And then once the listener is enabled, jump to the features screen. Now, all of our listeners have specific activity features. These are the features that, when enabled, will push specific events and details into the browser's data layer when that activity occurs on your website. You can see examples of that data layer activity here. So we're going to go ahead and enable all of the chat activity for the live chat listener. And in addition to the events for the data layer activity appearing here, you can also take a look at the event settings screen to get an additional view of what that looks like. So we're going to go ahead and publish that. And then we're going to take a look at our demo website. And I have the demo website open already, along with my Google Tag Manager debug. I'm going to actually refresh that preview just to ensure that we have the latest version of everything and make sure that we are properly connected. So on my test site here now, we're going to jump to the live chat page. And we're going to start to look at the chat activity. Now, at this point, it's important to note that most chat tools are very different in their functionality. Some of them, like live chat, allow you to ask questions up front. Others might allow you to create more of kind of like a chatbot experience. And the listeners for each of these chat tools can also slightly differ. For example, live chat allows us to kind of push in more information into the data layer about the conversation, whereas a HubSpot chat doesn't necessarily make that information available. So it's important to note that you're going to want to spend some time with your chat tool, testing it out and seeing when certain information is available and when it's not, especially as you get into more advanced features such as segmenting out chat types. So in this case, in our live chat, we have decided to add a question up at the front here where we're going to ask the user, are they interested in sales or support? And when I start my chat activity, what you'll notice right away is that the listener from ListenLayer has pushed information into the data layer. Now you can see that in the console if you inspect Element, or it can be sometimes a little bit easier just to use Google Tag Manager debug to look at that. So you can see because of the specific features that we turned on, we've received 3 different events into our data layer. Now, one thing I'm noticing is that because we're asking the user for their email up front, perhaps in this scenario, I don't actually need the live chat user entered email event in my data layer because that might occur no matter what every single time a user starts a chat. And so going back to what I was explaining about kind of getting to know your chat tool, this is one of those examples where you might just decide, hey, I'm going to save some event volume inside of ListenLayer, and I'm actually going to disable this particular feature. But what we'll notice in this case is that that event is the one that captured the information from our form. And so if I do disable this, I would want to retest it and make sure that the chat started event is going to capture that form information. And if it doesn't, then I would actually need to keep this event on. So again, just illustrating the point that you're going to need to get familiar with your chat tool and exactly the functionality and what gets pushed into the data layer at various points in time. Drift operates a little different than Intercom, which operates a little different than Live Chat or HubSpot. So now what we'll notice is we have an event and we have this information specifically from the actual form that the user has to fill out at the outset. And notice that the value of this, what can we help you with, is equal to sales. And so in Google Tag Manager, let's say I want to segment out my sales chats from my support chats. Now, all of the information I need is just readily available directly in the data layer. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy the name of this event, and we're going to create a trigger. Because what we want to do is we want to trigger certain activity to occur based on that event and then the value of a variable in the data layer when that event occurs. So I'm going to create the trigger and I'm going to choose custom event. And I'm going to simply paste the name of the data layer event that we were just looking at here. And this would trigger all the time, regardless of what the user selected in that dropdown. But remember, in this case, we want to actually only trigger it maybe if there's a sales chat. So I'm going to rename this to sales chat started. And I'm going to save it because I need to create a variable to actually capture the piece of information that I want, which is this value of what can we help you with? And then the subfield underneath that is value. Now, there's a few different ways I can get this, but one thing that's important to note is that as we jump back into Listen Layer itself, the variable settings screen will automatically collect information about the data layer activity and specifically here, the individual variables that appear, and it will make those available inside of this screen. And so what we are looking for is this chat automatic values, followed by form field values, followed by what can we help you with? And these, we're already looking at our automatic values. And so we're going to be looking for form field values. And then what can we help you with? So this is actually the field that we're looking at there. But then there's 3 subfields inside there. There's the label, there's the type, and there's the value itself. Now here you can see this is the path to that variable. I can actually just copy that here. The other thing that you can do is in the console of the browser, you can see this event and you can also copy the path to that variable. So we're going to jump in here and I'll explain the path a little bit more, but we're going to create the variable in Google Tag Manager and we're going to select a data layer variable because that's where we're getting this from. And I'm going to go ahead and paste the path. Now, let me talk about this path a little bit. So think of the path as no different than a URL path up here. Each node is separated by a /. Well, in the data layer references here for the variables, the same thing is true except that the / is replaced with a period. And so the nested values, the child node inside of the parent node comes after the parent node. And so the parent node was chat automatic values dot form field values dot what can we help you with dot value. So it can be a little bit confusing, but if you figure out the way to kind of navigate it inside of variables here, or even to use the console, it's very easy to copy that. And so this is going to be I'm going to call this the chat type. I'm going to save this. And just to double check, I'm going to go back here and I'm going to say, well, my value here is going to be sales. And when I want my value to equal sales in that variable in order for me to actually trigger an event or some conversion. So I've navigated back to my event in Google Tag Manager, and I'm going to limit the scope of this so that it only occurs when the event name is that and when my chat type is equal to sales. And now I'm going to save this. Now, in order to test this, because live chat will hold on to my session pretty good, I'm actually going to have to kind of close out of this guest profile in the browser. And I'm going to have to open it back up and kind of start a new chat session to just double check and test what's happening. So what's going to happen though, if you don't want to stick around and watch that whole thing, when you refresh your preview mode and you're able to start a new session in your chat, once that chat event occurs and is pushed into the data layer, just like here, and this value equals sales, then any tags that we create are going to fire on that event. They're going to show up here as tags fired. So before we do anything, sometimes I recommend just creating a test tag because it's a little bit easier to make sure that something's working if you just create a little tag here. So we're just going to create a empty script tag. And we're going to fire this on that sales chat started. Now, of course, if you're ready, you could go ahead and just create a specific tag like a Google Ads conversion tracking tag if you would like. And you could create one for sales and one for support. And that way you can start to segment and see how many of your chats are sales, how many of them are support as being driven specifically by Google Ads. So when I come back here, we will have a fresh session in live chat and we'll be able to take a look at this working in the wild. Okay, so here we are back inside of Google Tag Manager with a kind of a fresh session for our live chat tool. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to preview those changes that we just completed so I can double check to make sure that my test tag is actually firing when a sales chat begins. So we're going to reopen up our demo site. And we're going to jump to our live chat testing page. Make sure our debug is connected. And then we're going to begin a chat. And of course, I'm going to select sales. And we're going to start the chat activity. So now we're going to navigate back over to our live chat user entered email. Now we can notice just by looking at the summary that our test tag for chat has actually already fired. But let's make sure it's firing on the correct event. So I'm going to drill into the event that we expect it to fire on, which is when the user entered their email, kind of filled out that form in the chat. And of course, it should be firing because they selected sales. And we're seeing here that, yes, the tag is firing. We can even drill in there and we can check out the values and we can look at specifically why it met the conditions in order for that to fire. So that's at this point, we have configured a trigger that uses Listen Layer out of the box to automatically segment our chats between sales and support. Of course, I would recommend tracking conversions for support chats also so that you can kind of compare the two against each other. And then because Listen Layer automates this using a listener and the data layer, now all we have to do is set up a very simple framework in Google Tag Manager like this, and then we can amplify our tracking. So we can set up conversion tracking directly in Google Ads. We could set up those same conversions in LinkedIn. We could set them up in Facebook. We could set them up in Universal Analytics. We could set them in Google Analytics 4. Any place that you want to send this data now is very simple to send, and it's managed with just some simple setup and a form at the beginning of our chat. Now, again, your chat tool, you may have to do this a little bit differently. Maybe you have to focus on a response from the agent. And maybe the agent responds and says, yeah, sure, we can help you with a sales chat, because it automatically identified through your chat conversation that the user is looking for sales. And so then based on that intent, your chatbot maybe responds with a specific message that contains a keyword. And you can actually, in some listeners, you can actually grab onto that keyword inside that message from the agent, and you could trigger your particular conversion based on that. So this is just one example of the powerful things that ListenLayer can do for you across your website. We hope you